you taken your breakfast?
No.
Not yet.
Oh, not yet. You are going to the class with empty stomach. Okay. Are we ready to go?
I believe so.
Okay. If that's the case, we will go on. We will continue to talk about Malaysia. As I have mentioned to you yesterday, we have a number of uniqueness in the Malaysian Buddhism. And I had also previewed a brief background, the historical background of Malaysia. And then we talk about the historical background. And I would like to go on to one unique characteristics of Malaysian Buddhism, and that is the rise of lay organizations. As I have mentioned to you earlier, there are at least two unique characteristics of Malaysian Buddhism. Number one is the rise of many lay Buddhist organizations in Malaysia, and number one is the social engagement aspect. So I will elaborate further on these two aspects. So first, we look at the lay Buddhist organizations in Malaysia. We discuss this topic mainly because lay Buddhist organizations play a prominent role in Malaysian Buddhism. And usually people say that if you talk about humanistic Buddhism, then humanistic Buddhism talk about collective effort, talk about organizations. And one of them is to give prominence to lay Buddhist organizations. So we need to discuss this in more details. Traditionally, Buddhism is run by temples. So in our Malaysian scenario, temples are usually entrusted to either a board of trustees or owned by the monk. In many cases, we have so-called hermitage or temples registered in the name of the monks. And we also have a number of temples where the temple is especially during the British days, when the British government gave away land to build the temples, they normally look for trustees. So usually we have a group of 4 persons to become trustees. And in the early days, just to brief you a little bit about the old historical part. In the early days, many temples were actually they ran on the principle of the Chinese community built the temples, and then they invited monks from China to come over, and those monks would reside in the temple, and they would collect whatever donations given to the temples. So those monks subsisted on those donations. Then it came a time also, Chinese community felt that to get the monks to come, and then the monks would collect donations, and then we get a portion of the collection. That may not be the best system. So they sort of invented a system. We call it in English maybe it's like tendering system, So they would ask some monks to tender for the management of that particular temple. If you tender, let's say you tender a price of say $50,000 a year, then that temple, this particular monk would take over and you manage. But you would give the management committee, the temple trustees, $50,000 per year. But the rest of the collections, the devotees' money that comes in, whatever, will go to that particular monk. So that system, actually, it is still practiced by a few temples, not many, few temples in Penang. And then temples are run by resident monks. Unfortunately, but we need to know is in Malaysia, we don't have big temples or big monasteries like you see in Taiwan. Most of the temples here are with a small group of monastics, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. That's about all. And a number of hermitage usually actually had only one person. So in contrast, lay organizations is owned and managed by a committee of an organization. Usually we have a registered committee, registered with the government as an organization. And then we have a registered committee, then with the monks, which usually invite monks as religious leaders. So all lay Buddhist organizations would have a monk or 2 or maybe more as their religious advisors. Now, why is there a rise of lay Buddhist organizations? Whereas before 1900, you will notice that most of the Buddhist activities were sponsored and run by temples. Temples manage all the Buddhist activities. And then around 1920 onwards, we have some Buddhist organizations that appear. And some of these Buddhist organizations, they build temple-like organizations. For example, the Sinhalese temple in Kuala Lumpur actually is a lay organization. But after building up the temples, they invited monks from Sri Lanka to come over to manage, to run the daily affairs of the temple. So why is there such a change with the lay Buddhist organizations coming up? I think the main reason is the social change. More and more people wanting to learn Buddhism, but the number of monks did not increase correspondingly. Especially around 1900 onwards, when the second generation Chinese mostly settled down, they have better education, and when they look for religions, which like I said earlier, identity is with Buddhism, but they could not find answers in the temples because there were no monks. So they started organizing themselves. So they are lay Buddhist organizations that came up. And another reason is traditional temples seem to lose its attractiveness and monks losing respect. I give an example here. PBA means Penang Buddhist Association. And the Kuan Im Teng Penang. Kuan Im Teng or the Huang Fu Gong in Penang. That Kuan Im Teng in Penang is something like the Cheng Hun Teng in Malacca. That temple has a Kuan Yin as a main deities, but many other non-Buddhist objects of worship were also there. And the way the place was run was such that there was hardly any religious teaching of Buddhism there. So a group of street-born Chinese in the year 1925, they formed the Penang Buddhist Association. And when they formed the Penang Buddhist Association, they actually wrote in their preamble why they formed this organization was to counter the wrong practices, the superstitious belief that were carried out in the name of Buddhism in the so-called Buddhist temples, which some scholars believe they were referring to Kuan Im Teng. Kuan Im Teng still exists till today. This group of street-born Chinese, we call them street-born Chinese because they would be second or third generation Chinese. They basically speak English or their dialect Hokkien. So they formed Penang Buddhist Association. Basically, it's a Mahayana temple, but run by English-speaking people, even until today. But in the early days, they use Hokkien as their dialect, as their medium of communication. So that from here we know there was something that the temples could not cope up to the demand of that time, and so some people formed Buddhist organizations. And then another third reason was that the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia was formed in 1970. And as a national organization, it helps to accelerate the growth of many lay Buddhist organizations. So in the 1980s, the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia have about 300 member organizations throughout the countries. So I mentioned just now, 1925, the Penang Buddhist Association was formed. But I want to clarify one thing here. This has nothing to do with the concept of lay Buddhism in China. This group of strict-born Chinese knows nothing about Tai Chi or whatever Mahayana Buddhism. They just formed the association with the idea that they wanted to know something about Buddhism. That's all. Okay. This is the outlook of the Penang Buddhist Association. Then Buddhist Youth Movement and Lay Buddhist Organization. That one was 1925, sometime during the First World War. Then we come to 1955. The first Buddhist youth circle was formed in Malaysia. Then in 1947, this monk, we often call him Father Sumangalo, following the Christian tradition, call him Father Mangalo, but actually he's a Buddhist monk from USA who also studied in Japan. So in 1957, he came over to Malaysia, Penang, and started forming many Buddhist organizations. So I give you here a brief background. It's okay, you can't remember them, just to get an idea. 1958 to 1962, we have at least 11 youth groups formed in Malaysia. And by 1958, 1 year after independence, we have the Malaysian Buddhist Youth Federation, but it became defunct in 1964. The main reason, I think, was transport and communication for the national organization. Although Malaya, the Peninsular Malaya, is a small piece of land, but to travel from one end to the other end in the 1960s would probably take around 12 hours from Singapore right until 12 hours. And so people, especially youngsters who were not financially well off, would find it very difficult to communicate, to travel. So the national organization defunct in 1964. Another things that we need to note is in the 1960s, immediately after independence, we gained our independence in 1957. Many colleges were started and later turned into universities, and Buddhist societies were formed within these institutions. So in one of my writings, I did mention that actually many Buddhist societies were formed in these institutions of higher learning, actually as a response to Christian activities in the campus. Because Christianity, backed by the colonial powers, the missionaries who built churches and built schools, so they were very active in promoting Christianity or Catholic both schools in the campuses. So, but majority of the Chinese were not Christians. So it came as a response that since we are Buddhist and so many people are talking about Christianity, why not we form association to learn about Buddhism? So that's how many Buddhist organizations were formed in the campuses. And these organizations together, they gathered together and formed the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia in 1970. One thing we need to note is, until this stage, 1970, no one talked about humanistic Buddhism in Malaysia. even though we say it has the characteristic of humanistic Buddhism, but actually nobody mentioned about this word humanistic Buddhism. This is just a small story to let you know that in the early days when the lay Buddhist organizations were formed, there were also some people who were against the idea of calling the association. For example, this one is called Selayang Buddhist Association. So many monks were of the opinion that you cannot call yourself Buddhist Association. Maybe you can say Buddhist Study Group or a Buddhist Study Group. But to call it a Buddhist association is supposed to be run by monks, supposed to be temples. So there were actually objections. But since the government did not bother, as long as you submit your registration in this name, the government would register it. So this thing became very common. So later days, nobody talked about it anymore. Okay? Nobody objected to this anymore. But it's worthwhile to mention that there is a Buddhist organization in the Borneo side of Malaysia, on the eastern side of Malaysia. We call it the Kuching Lay Buddhist Lodge. This particular lodge is unique in the sense that they actually talk about humanistic Buddhism, 1970. They formed the society in 1970. And until today, they have organized 6 lay Buddhist forums, especially in recent times in the new millennium. They started organizing a number of international lay Buddhist forums, because the chairman is exposed to lay Buddhism of Taishi in China. And in 2012, Malaysian Buddhist Kulapati Association was formed under the leadership of this organization. So now we have a national lay Buddhist organization. Kulapati means a lay Buddhist. So that is briefly the background of Buddhist organizations in Malaysia. I would like to share with you now what are the special characteristics of these lay Buddhist organizations. Number one, democratically run. You see, temples are run under the principle of master-disciple. Usually in the temple, you have master, you have a few disciples, and the operation, we call it black box operation. Actually, nobody knows what is going on inside there. Only the master and the disciple would know. Actually, the disciple also wouldn't know. Maybe only the master knows. So this kind of things has led to can lead to misuse or even loss of properties. So I personally have seen some of the properties in Kuala Lumpur area, which were actually temples, then entrusted to trustees. But actually trustees couldn't be bothered. And you know, in Malaysia, the law is if the trustees die, the children or the offsprings of the trustees automatically become trustees, unless you have made a replacement before he died or things like that, or make it very clear. Otherwise, the children would automatically take over. So what happened is, in a case that I've seen myself, the four trustees, one by one, died, and then finally left probably one last trustees, and he has got a number of children, and his children automatically become the trustees. And you have a problem because sometimes the children were no longer Buddhist. So we actually had one case where the children became Christians already. So to get the properties transferred back to the Buddhist community, you have to get his or her cooperation. So there's a problem of property loss if not properly operated. Whereas for the lay Buddhist organization, it's run on a democratic principle, better accountability, and this is much better. But we need to note one thing is that actually lay Buddhist organization, we learn democracy from practicing it. not because we practice democracy because we are democratically conscious, because we inherited the British system, the British way of running organizations. They already have the template, so you have to follow the template. You have to have annual general meeting, you have to elect people, and so these democratic processes we adopt and we follow, and gradually this idea of democracy comes in. So this become a very prominent characteristic. The second important characteristic is the changed value perceptions. Because lay Buddhist organizations are democratic organizations, so gradually they absorb values of modern civic education. So values like liberty, justice, human rights, even gender inclusiveness, civil participation, good governance, truth, etc., become more and more prominent in the lay Buddhist organizations. This is not so much in temples or among the monks, but the lay people, they become more and more conscious with certain values. So actually I make a study and make a chart to find out in the past what were our major values and present what are our major values. For example, in the past, Buddhist, a major value in us is self-cultivation. Okay? But today, a major value in us is social engagement. We must be socially engaged. And this is prominent among lay Buddhist organizations. Perhaps monks or nuns, with their training and practices, they were more concerned with self-cultivation and less on social engagement. And we Buddhists, we always talk about metta, loving kindness or karuna, compassion. But youngsters in the lay Buddhist organization will give a lot of emphasis on truth and justice. Okay? And then we have these called traditional values. You see traditional values like respect for the elders, honor those who are worthy of honors, like we always chant in the Mangala Suttas, humility, courtesy, and so on. All these we find that all these traditional values 2,500 years ago taught by the Buddha and also by Confucius, all these values we still cherish. But you notice in lay Buddhist organization, they value us. I call it a new set of values of the democracy of civil society. Values like liberty, democracy, equality, human rights, and so on. Okay, so just an example, we talk about capital punishment. You know, in USA, you still have capital punishment, right? Certain states might have already abolished, but in the past, if a person like Reverend Shinging still support that they should be capital punishment. But with the values that we are now acquainted with, we tend to say no. We are against capital punishment. So these changing values, you can find prominence in the lay Buddhist organization, but not so much in the temple. So these changed values resulted in what is rarely seen in Chinese Buddhism. Bodhi challenges the establishment and the authorities and active social engagement because of this value change. So I like to give you an example. Just now we talk about, we talk about respect for the elders, humility, courtesy, and all. Today's youngsters, especially the lay Buddhists, talk about truth, democracy, equality, human rights. So let's say an old man talk about something. Let's say he talk about we should abolish capital punishment, or let's say he talk about we should uphold capital punishment. But youngsters not agreeing with this old man will not show him the due respect or speak courteously about this. He or she will just talk straight and direct to him, and this is what is happening. Okay. So you take example, Venerable Jin Kong, I mentioned to you just yesterday, a very famous monk who came from Taiwan. Venerable Jin Kong is well known for his Pure Land preaching, but he also makes certain remarks which we could not understand. For example, he said, if you practice well, you shouldn't fall sick. If you fall sick, that's because you don't practice. Well, if you say like this, in the past, out of courtesy, out of respect for the elder, especially a monk, we would just nod our heads and say, yeah, yeah, yeah. But now, no. Now, many people fire him in the Facebook or in all the social media. You old man, you are getting crazy. Even the Buddha fall sick. And what are you talking about? If practicing, then you don't fall sick. And in that case, if a person didn't fall sick, he can always say, I'm a well-practiced person. I'm what do you call it, a practitioner, isn't it? So people would counter him. People actually counter him. And then give you another example. He made another very strange statement that if you play computer games on killing, then that is as good as killing. You already committed the Vinaya of, you already break the Vinaya of no killing. Then again, a lot of youngsters, young Buddhists would, no, you are talking nonsense. So we make a survey in the internet and find that actually now majority disagree. It means to say new generation of lay Buddhists would not just accept what you say. They have their new set of values and they use this new set of values to gauge. Okay. And we give another example. This man, you know, is the chief reverend of Prithvi Buddhist Temple, a successor of Venerable K. Sri Ramananda. He was a disciple of Venerable K. Sri Ramananda. When Venerable K. Sri Ramananda passed away in 2006, he became the chief monk of Prithvi Buddhist Temple. And through his good connections, was made a dato in the year, I think, 2008 or something, 2008. And he was asked to go to the palace to get the award, to attend the award ceremony. And he put on a long suit instead of his, went there with his monk's robe. He actually took away his robe and then he put on his monk suit. Well, in the olden days, if this happened, lay Buddhists would just keep quiet. We will respect the elders. We will respect whatever old people do, especially monks. But the time has changed. The Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia, which actually he was the religious advisor, actually went to talk to him, asked him for an explanation. Why are you doing like this? It's such a disgrace to Buddhism, and so forth. And after they came back, the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia actually stripped him of the title of religious advisor. So you see the changing values of the young people now. It's different. When we need to change, we change and we counter him. And for that matter, a lot of his disciples in the Prithvi Buddhist Mahavira actually helped an NGM to try to fire him off, but they did not succeed. Okay, so these two episodes tell us that lay Buddhist organization, the values are the values of today's simple society: liberty, justice. We talk about justice. We talk about truth. We don't care whether you are old or you are monk. You are not. Whether you are old or monk, it's not a major consideration. They argue on truth now. Okay. Okay. Now I go on to the third one: social engagement. Lawrence Waikelo is a scholar from the Shanghai University. He mentioned that the social engagement of lay Buddhist organization in Malaysia is a very rare phenomenon among the Chinese Buddhism. He noticed that even in Taiwan, social engagement of Taiwanese Buddhism is always on the, we call it the right side, right hand side, right wing side, not on the left wing side. Left wing side means able to challenge the society, bring up critical issues, radical issues. But on the right side means talk to the government, build hospitals, build schools, do charity, all this kind of engagement. Whereas on the left side, means we willing to prepare to talk to the government, to challenge government policies. And this, he said, you can only find in the Malaysian Buddhism, which is rarely found in other Chinese Buddhism. And he mentioned Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia is a lay organization since its formation. Hence, we can see that lay people are more concerned and sensitive to public issues. On the other hand, the monks nominated Malaysian Buddhist Association appeared rather lifeless in this aspect. So I'm only quoting from this scholar Y.K. Lau. If I'm not quoting him and I'm saying this, I will have another fire from the Malaysian Buddhist Association. Okay. But this is an observation made by a scholar. And it is true because our Malaysian Buddhist Association, the constitution is such that the president and the secretary must be monks. And the treasurer also must be monks. And these organizations preferred to not to bring up any issues. In fact, very quiet most of the time. So Professor Y.K. Liu Yiguang, he said it implied a rise in civic consciousness and a yearning for values of civil society among the youngsters. Such changes in consciousness and value perception do not seem to be seen among the monastics in the temples. And their organizations feel the role reluctant to be played by temples and monastics, hence change the landscape of Malaysian Buddhism. At least it breaks the notion that Buddhism is reclusive and otherworldly. Okay? So this is an important role played by lay Buddhist organization that is to be socially engaged. And we will talk more in details about this socially engaged under another subsection. Okay. Another characteristic: lay Buddhist organizations dilute sectarianism. We have Mahayana, Theravada, Vajrayana, and all those things. And lay Buddhist organizations manage to dilute all these sects very well. So in Malaysia, all major functions, you would invite all the representatives of the sects to come in. This is a national Mahasangika Dana, national offering of dana to the monks. So you have Vajrayana monks, you have Theravada monks, you have Mahayana monks. Most of the time we have all. And our chanting will be Theravada first, then after that Mahayana, after that Vajrayana. So it's a bit lengthy, but satisfy everybody, make everybody happy. Okay. Another thing is, lay Buddhists in Malaysia go to all three traditions very freely. So it's very common to see a lay Buddhist in the morning, maybe go to a Mahayana temple to offer some chopsticks, and then evening, and then during lunchtime, go and offer food or dana to monks in the Theravada temples, and then probably in the evening, go and listen to talk in the Vajrayana traditions. So in a way, the lay Buddhists break all these sects. So in fact, I was told by our late Chief Reverend Kesri Tamananda, he said, actually for lay Buddhists, you don't have any traditions. Only we monks have traditions. You know why? Because we monks, we have certain rules, customs to follow in our traditions. You lay Buddhists, what traditions do you follow? You go to work, you follow your office procedures. You drive your car, you wear your dress like any normal person. What tradition are you talking about? So he has a point. So we don't have to quarrel over all these traditions. So whenever people ask me what tradition, I say I'm just a Buddhist. Okay. And then number 5, characteristic number 5. Lay Buddhist organizations tend to come up with wide varieties of activities. So when we have a wide variety of activities, probably because of the exposure of lay Buddhists to the lay world, then they tend to think of activities that are more connected to the lay world. For example, if you are an artist, then you would like to have an art exhibition to attract people to Buddhism. And there are a lot of people who like to sing. So we use hymn singing, we use concert to attract people to Buddhism. So lay Buddhists always come up with a lot of varieties of activities to connect to the masses. And this is a departure from the conventional temple activities, which are primarily ritualistic. Because monks, by nature, because of their less contact with the mundane world, they would not be bothered to think about this kind of activities. Whereas lay people, because of the lay activities that they were exposed to daily, then they tend to be more open to a number of activities. So in fact, some lay Buddhists introduce, let's say, hymn singings. In the early days, even hymn singings were condemned by those condemned by some of the very more conservative Buddhists. They said, you want to sing, you can sing at home, sing in the clubhouse, but you cannot sing in the temples. So there were such opinions. So, but with the lay Buddhist organizations carrying out more and more of such activities nowadays, hymn singing has become very common. Characteristic number 6, emphasis on research and study. Because of our exposure, nowadays lay Buddhist organizations tend to be more exposed and also realize the importance of academic research. So we actually set up Buddhist Research Society of Malaysia 10 years ago. I'm now the president of this organization since its formation. So every 2 years, we organize an academic seminar on Malaysian Buddhism. But just to remind you, I'm not a researcher. Okay, we only formed this organization to provide a platform for researchers in the universities come and share their research findings with the Buddhist population. So we provide the platform only, but we do not do our own research. Although at times we may need to collect some data and present some papers, but I can't count myself as a Buddhist researcher. And there were many others. There were a few organizations like Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia and also the Kulapati Association, all lay Buddhist organizations. We used to organize seminars. So in Malaysia, practically every year you have one seminar, except this year. Okay, so practically every year you have one large-scale seminar. And we also have one large-scale seminar called Global Conference on Buddhism, GCB, which are held in English, a series of conferences. So among the topics that we talk about religious freedom, Islamization, gender inclusiveness, deviant Buddhist sects, engaged Buddhism. All these topics are topics which traditional Chinese Buddhism would avoid. Okay? So in a way, it reflects the wisdom of the lay leadership and shows the vision and exploratory approach of lay Buddhist organizations. Okay, the next characteristic is training and development. Lay Buddhist organizations do a lot of training and development. So today, most leaders or volunteers were mostly trained by lay Buddhist organizations, including a lot of monks who are people who are monks now. They were actually leaders in the lay Buddhist organizations in their early days. And then Sunday classes practically all run by lay people. And many lay preachers, including those teaching in the national service camps or prisons, are lay people. And last but not least, that lay Buddhist organization actually support the Sangha. This is a symbiotic relationship. The vision and mission of lay Buddhist organizations are definitely not one that place the lay people as leaders of Buddhism, as strongly conceived by many people. Lay Buddhist organizations, we provide the workforce. We provide the lay force, the life force. But we don't claim to be leaders. We always honor the monks as our leaders. And that way, we have this mutual support. In fact, lay Buddhist organizations help to develop many lay talents who eventually become monks or nuns, and thus help in the overall development of Buddhism. And lay Buddhist organization enlarge the pool of lay Buddhists, get more and more people to support the monks and nuns. Okay. All lay Buddhist organizations maintain good relationship with and support the monastics, and monastics provide guidance and leadership to the lay Buddhist organizations. This is how Malaysian Buddhism operates now. So this is the part that I talk about on lay organizations. The next part will be on social engagement, and the next characteristics on social engagement. So perhaps you can take a rest now. Then we'll continue later for the next.
Real quick, what is deviant Buddhist sects? What does that mean?
Deviant Buddhist sects. There are a number of Buddhist sects now working very actively in Malaysia. They all carry the name of Buddhism. Okay? Carry the name of Buddhism. But they are not preaching Buddhism. So we call them deviant Buddhist sects. For example, there's one called Lu Tai Chang from Australia. Lu Tai Chang actually came from China but migrated to Australia, and he started the Guan Yin door or something like that. And where you notice that whenever he comes to Malaysia, he would have a big gathering in the stadium, and what he would do most of the time would be to let people ask him questions while he was sitting up on the stage. When people ask him questions, he would close half of his eyes and mumbling, and people would ask him what happened to my father who had passed away, and then he would close his eyes and okay. Then he would try to like go to the other world, to search for the deceased person, things like that. Okay, then he will tell you what to do, and then some people will come to him about certain sicknesses. Then he will say, well, he will just look around and say, oh yeah, I think in the past life you did this wrong thing, that wrong thing, all this thing like that. So now you must go back and chant more of, do more of this. He call it a small house, a little house. Every time you chant something, and then you just put a dot in the house, or the paper house. So this kind of practices, which is not taught in Buddhism, are carried by some of these people and claim to be Buddhist. So we call them deviant Buddhist. And of course, scholars try to use a more neutral term. They call them new religion, a new religion. Okay, so these are the groups, and they are actually quite a number of groups now, very active in the Chinese community all over the world, USA included, and where they can find a lot of resources or support. Okay, do I answer you?
Yes. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, any question? Yes.
Lisa, did you have a question or did you just unmute yourself?
Oh no, I was just thinking something like that. I saw a lot of that practice in Taiwan, but those people didn't call them Buddhist or Buddhism Association. It's just a source that for people to seek for answers that they don't know about. But somehow I think in Malaysia they call that as a Buddhist association as part of it.
No. These deviant Buddhist groups usually is very big. It's transnational group. It's not the small timer in the small temples that do this kind of things. That we also have in Malaysia. Okay, but now I'm referring to this transnational group. Where each time they come, they would let their devotees in China, Taiwan, Hong Kong know, and those devotees would flow into Kuala Lumpur and attend their function in a stadium, and large-scale stadium. So it's a large-scale demonstration of cult practices, where they can try to heal your sicknesses, or try to read your past life, things like that. So this type of deviant groups, we do not, we call them deviant Buddhists. And in fact, like Falun Gong also, in Malaysia, we also consider them as a deviant Buddhist group because they label themselves as Buddhist. But we know Falun Gong has, if they don't call themselves as Buddhist, then we are not bothered about them. They have the right to survive by themselves. But if they call themselves as Buddhist, and in many instances even ridicule Buddhism, then we will speak up. Okay.
Yeah, it seems like those people are more organized. They have a lot more followers, so becomes really big. But there are some that they are very small, but they do have that special ability, the superpower that they are able to see people's past and to read whatever that we normal people cannot do. Is that right? It's just they are very big.
I don't think it's about superpower. It's about human psychology and black magic, because they can actually use human psychology to manipulate us. For example, if a person were to ask, say, now I have a cancer, what shall I do? That great master would ask back, what stage? Okay? If he is really that great, he should know what stage, but he's not that great. He would ask, what stage now? And that person would say, it's at the 4th stage. And every one of us know 4th stage means about to die, it's terminal. Okay? Then he would tell, okay, you got 4th stage, actually you only got 6 months more to go. Okay? So instill fear first. You only got 6 months more to go. But okay, I will pray on your behalf to Kuan Yin. I will pray on your behalf to Kuan Yin. Then you will last longer. How much longer? Not mentioned. So this is all psychology. Suppose that person die within 6 months, well, I already told you already you're going to die in 6 months. Suppose the person lasts longer than 6 months, Well, all his fans would say, well, you see, the master is so powerful. The master can extend the lifespan by another, say, few months. So this is all human psychology. This is my reading. Okay? But nowadays, there are clever people who know how to make this into large commercial scale, you know. Okay. So
Okay.
Buddhism cannot compete with this kind of deviant teachings because it is at a different level. It is a level that caters to a lot of superstitious belief people who are inclined to that kind of superstitious belief. Buddhism cannot compete on that. They become big not because Buddhism is weak, but because it is by nature that they cover an area which people who are very superstitious are inclined to follow. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Break time.
Just a moment. Just a moment.
Okay.
I have received the assignment, but I think I still need the assignment. Danish Bloom, are you here? Your assignment still not in yet.
Yes, it's coming.
It's coming, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, Danish Bloom. And the other one is Wen Yin Yong. Wen Yin Yong.
I'm here.
Yeah, your assignment's not in yet.
Oh, yes. I will do today.
Okay, all right. And Reverend Kong Chen already told me about it, so only three more persons. Okay. Okay, now we take a rest. We'll come back. Okay, right. At the outset, I mentioned that there are a few unique characteristics of Malaysian Buddhism. One of them is the rise of lay Buddhist organizations or the prominent role played by the lay Buddhist organizations. So we spent the last 1 hour talking about the lay Buddhist organizations. Another unique characteristics of Malaysian Buddhism, as mentioned by scholars, is that Malaysian Buddhism is very much socially engaged. So I would like to talk further about this social engagement in line with our subject, which is social humanistic Buddhism. Recently, there are a few scholars who say that this social engagement in Malaysian Buddhism is a new phenomenon. New in the sense that it is something that happened only about 12 years ago, in the year 2008, when there was a sort of a political tsunami where the ruling party lost 5 states out of 13 states in one of the general elections held in the year 2008. And therefore, and after that, we noticed there was a lot of what they call the public opinions expressed by the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia on a lot of public issues. And therefore, a lot of people concluded that it is a new phenomenon arising after the year 2008 or a bit earlier, maybe 2005, prior to the change of, prior to the so-called political tsunami. But I would like to counter this argument because I have my own research found that actually this happened much earlier. Our engagement happened much earlier, immediately after the war. The war was over in the year 1945, when the Japanese surrendered in Malaysia to the British forces. Then the British immediately came back, and by 1946, they were already in charge of Malaya again. Then a lot of Buddhists in Malaya already began its first social engagement with the government to demand the government. At that time, we use a very polite word, to petition, to ask the government to declare Vesak to be a public holiday. So that was our first social engagement. And this also has nothing to do with Chinese Buddhism, because the leaders at that time were street-born Chinese who were English educated, much more much more inclined to Theravada Buddhism. They were actually not exposed to Humanistic Buddhism or Tai Chi or things like that. So they lobby for Vesak to be declared a public holiday, and eventually in the year 1949, out of 11 states in the peninsula, 4 states declared Vesak as a public holiday. So now I'm writing a book to record down these events from the 1948 onwards up to 1962, 1970, up to when the whole of Malaysia was given a Vesak as a public holiday. So this book, about 64 pages, would be published soon, probably this month or next month. Then, but here is a record to show that the Buddhists were actively involved. And a significant thing to note is that the people who were involved were the street-born Chinese. Then we also have the Gunaratana, the Sinhalese monk that I mentioned to you earlier, Gunaratana, who was supposed to be the proponent of Vesak as a public holiday. Then we also involve the Myanmar people, and the Thai people, and the Sinhalese people. So all the 4 races, 4 ethnic groups joined together to form what we call a Vesak Holiday Committee to lobby the government to declare Vesak as a holiday. So this is the starting point after the war of our social engagement. And so based on the above, we continuously lobbied the government, and Vesak became a national public holiday in 1962. And then later on, we continue some more for the Borneo states, which happened in 1978 and 1983. And then in 1966 also, at that time, the president of the Malaysian Buddhist Association, Reverend Kim Beng, was very strong in protesting against the screening of a film which was said to defame or run down Buddhism. And this is also unique in the sense that while Malaysian Buddhist leaders, headed by a Mahayana monk, Venerable Kim Beng, objected to the screening of this film, and he wrote similar letters to Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, asking for similar actions. And the leaders in those areas chose to either avoid the issues or to just do a token response to it. So you notice that Malaysia is a little bit different in the sense that the Malaysian Chinese Buddhist leaders were prepared to speak up to champion their rights, whereas the leaders in Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan at that time chose to not to be so actively involved, just sort of a token support for the cause. So this might have been something to do with our British background, being a colonized area, where we know some of our citizens' rights. And then we have a national crisis in the year 1969, a racial riot. And after the racial riots, the government came up with this national ideology called Rukun Negara. And Buddhist was consulted. The Buddhist Missionary Society Malaysia, of which I was once the president, and my predecessor was representing the Buddhists to sit in this council to talk about the formulation of a national ideology. And these organizations, Buddhist Missionary Society Malaysia, is a Theravada organization. It's an English-speaking organization, but it is very actively involved in social engagement with the government from the day of its formation in 1962 until today. So here is another evidence to show that we don't have much to do with the Tai Chi's teachings. This is the role of the Theravada English-speaking group. And then subsequently, we have a national education policy coming up. The country was in a lot of, I cannot say turmoil, but a lot of heated debates over a number of issues, especially after the racial riots in 1969. So 1974, we have educational policy. This one, who submitted the education policy? Again, the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia. Okay. Then 1979, we met with the Minister of Housing and Government on issue related to the location of places of worship. This we also refer to the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia. 1982, we submitted memo on Chinese, on the national Chinese culture, because at that time the government was formulating a so-called national culture. And the national culture policy says two important points. Number one, Islam and Malay shall be the core of the national culture. Number two, any other cultures that is compatible with number one can be accepted as national culture. So the Chinese community was up in arms, submitted a lot of memorandum to the government, and the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia again spoke on behalf of the Buddhists to voice our opinion. Then 1982, again, the government introduced common prayers in schools. Some of you might think, what's wrong with common prayers? But these common prayers is more like a Muslim prayer. So you are asking non-Muslim to join the Muslim prayers. So we have objections, and we met the Young Education Minister, Deputy Education Minister. I was one of the representatives of the Young Buddhist Association at that time. By the way, I came from Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia. 1983, we submitted memo to the Education Ministry requesting for Buddhism to be included in moral education subject. And I was later invited to conduct classes for moral education teachers. So this is our role, to try to tell the government that moral education alone is not good enough. We need to inculcate some religious values. So in a way, the government tried to accommodate some of our demands. So they invited us to send representatives to teach some of their moral education teachers. In Malaysia, moral education classes are open to non-Muslims when the Muslim students attend the Muslim religious classes. So at that particular time, the classes will be divided. The Muslim go for Muslim classes, the non-Muslims, all the non-Muslims will attend moral classes. Then 1983, we again submitted memo requesting for the formation of Buddhist societies in schools and universities. Until today, there are a number of schools and universities. We do not have recognized societies. Some of them operate, so to say, underground, without recognition from the universities. because some universities simply do not allow us to form. And those universities that have Buddhist societies were universities that allowed us to form Buddhist societies when we were under the British, when we were colleges, when we were under the British. Or in the early days, things were much more open and much more liberal. So Buddhist societies can be allowed in certain universities. And okay, next, again, 1983, we submitted memo on youth policy to Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport. Then we talk about places of worship and bureau to various local government and government plans. There are many government plans now. Every town and country planning would involve places of worship, would involve burial ground. And this, the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia, again came forward to put forth all our points. So that's why we say actually social engagement or political engagement, we can't run away from it. It is part of the modern civil society now that you have to be engaged, you have to be involved. And if you are not involved, then you abdicate your rights. Then the planners will just allocate certain places of worship for you or don't allocate for you. You can't do anything because you don't come. And fortunately, you have these lay young Buddhist organizations that was much more sensitive and responsive to all these kind of issues. Whereas the Malaysian Buddhist Association of Malaysia, headed by monks, tend to just ignore these kind of issues as if they had nothing of their concern. This is another issue. This has become a little bit of political issues. 1984, the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia joined another 24 organizations, submitted a memorandum on preventing the Bukit Cina that I mentioned to you just now. That is the oldest cemetery in Malaysia, and at one time there was a proposal by a group of investors to level the hill for development. So the Chinese were again up in arms and petitioned the government not to do so. So the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia also joined in. Considering that the Chinese hill or Bukit Cina is manned or managed by Cheng Hun Teng, so Cheng Hun Teng being a Buddhist temple, so we should be involved. And then we talk about dangerous drugs. We cover dangerous drug issues. 85, 1987, again we met with the Minister of Education, issues related to formation of Buddhist societies in universities and schools, and again object to common prayer. And so actually I did a research from June 2010 to June 2012, matter of 2 years. The Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia issued 26 press releases, making a lot of demands from the government or expressing our views or our objections to certain issues. So among the topics that you can see are topics that are directly affecting Buddhism. Like some of them I already shown you in the earlier screen, and some of them are of public interest. For example, we petitioned the government not to give more issues on gambling. We also talk about press liberty, free press, pressure the government to allow more for free press. Then we talk about human rights. Teo Beng Hock's case. This was a man who was detained by the special branch, by the what they call anti-corruption agency. He was called to the anti-corruption agency's office for an interview as a witness, but the next day he was found dead. Subsequent coroner court found that he was actually sort of, they said, forced suicide. Suicide, but not on his own free will. So, and the case is still not settled until today, more than 10 years already. People are still talking about it, that we need to return the human rights to these poor guys. So when the young Buddhists Malaysia talk about this issue, many people, especially the more conservative people, will say, "What has this got to do with Buddhism? Why are you involved in this? This is politics." Because this man is an assistant to a politician. So this is all political issue. Why are you involved? But the young Buddhists choose to speak up because this involves human rights. A well-built person who went into to the government office to help in an investigation ended up dead. And then we have many issues to deal with Islamic infringement, Islamic states, and things like that. And then we even talk about free and fair elections, supported those who champion free and fair elections, and historical Hindu Buddhist sites which were bulldozed away. So you can see that actually our social concern, our social engagement cover a wide range of topics. So I look at it, it is not a new phenomenon. It is an engagement, a heritage that was carried on from immediately after the war until today. Then, now we talk about the causes. Why are we involved in so much of the social engagement issues? Of course, one of the reasons why we are involved, why we are so socially engaged was to be socially engaged actually had become a cultural heritage in Malaysian Buddhism. Since 1949, we continue to engage the government and on a number of public issues. So it becomes like a habit, like a culture that we continue to do so. So one of the reasons is a cultural heritage that we continue to engage the government on a number of issues. And the second reason, probably this is the main reason, the emergence of many issues has to do with the rise of radical political Islam and Malay Islam nationalism, causing anxiety among non-Muslims, Muslim, Buddhists included, and hence the responses. So in fact, not only we Buddhists responded, Hindus, Christians, and Sikhs also responded from time to time, and at times jointly. All the non-Muslim religions jointly responded to a number of issues, mainly because of the emergence of this radical political Islam and Malay Islam nationalism. If you want to look at it, I can give you hours and hours of lectures on what are the issues that cropped up, because of this Islamization. Now, I will just share a few with you. First is about Islamization of laws or Islamic laws. If in our Attorney General Chamber, we have a section called Islamic law sections. All the laws have to be vetted there first to make sure it is Islamic. Okay, that is a side issue. Now, the main issue here is from the time of the British days, we have the Sharia court for the Muslims to cater to their some of the Muslim laws, especially marriage laws and property laws. Then with the Islamization, then nowadays the Islamic courts become so powerful that they were once subordinate courts to the civil court, But come 1980 something, they become independent from the civil court. And there are a lot of cases where the civil court also decided not to involve themselves in issues which are deemed to be under the Sharia court or the Islamic court. So this becomes an issue when there are cases involving non-Muslims, for example, a couple divorce, a non-Muslim couple divorce. One party one party after divorce bring the child to convert the child unilaterally. And the Sharia court says that conversion is valid. Well, the non-Muslim parent who did not agree with it, bring it to the civil court. The civil court will say, no. This issue, you have to go back to the Islamic court. So it ended up that a non-Muslim have to go to an Islamic court to get his or her justice done. So there are many such instances. And a famous case that happened in we call it the Indira Gandhi case. The Indira Gandhi, same name as Mrs. Indira Gandhi of India, but same name, different person. This Mrs. Indira Gandhi, this Indira Gandhi is a kindergarten teacher. She's a Hindu. The husband also Hindu, and once there was a big quarrel, a big fight between the husband and wife. Then the husband left her and took away the daughter, who was only 11 months old. 11 months old. That happened in the year 2008. About 10 years back. Okay, 10 years back. Today is 2020, so it's 2012. Okay. So the husband took away the child, and the husband, in order to make sure, or for whatever reasons, he converted to Islam, and he converted the child also to Islam. So this poor Indira Gandhi, wanting to see her child, went to the court. Well, the court says they are already Islam. You go to the Sharia court. So the court cases, the court battle, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, until 2018, 2 years ago, finally went to the highest court, and the highest court make a good judgment in the sense that the child conversion is not valid unless both parents agree to it. Since one parent did not agree, so the conversion is not valid. And the court also ruled that the child to be returned to this Indira Gandhi. But in this particular case, until today, she couldn't see her child. Her child by now is already 12 years old. She couldn't see her child. Or 9 years old now. She couldn't see her child because the police said they could not locate the husband. So this is still ongoing cases. These are still, and many such cases. So I give you another instance. Number of cases happen when some people converted to Islam without informing the family members. But the moment they die, our Malaysian enforcement officers here are better than CIA and FBI. You know, they straight away would know that this fellow is a Muslim at the moment when they take, and the authorities would come and take away the body and bury it in the Muslim burial ground. And if they were not too fast, the family already took it up to the non-Muslim burial ground. They would find a way to dig it back. So this is like snatching dead body, you see, fighting over dead bodies. So this is another case. And then you have the Hudud case. The Islamic parties is every day propagating about wanting to have an Islamic criminal law now. Sharia law is non-criminal law. Hudud is criminal law, involving the cutting off the hands and the legs for theft. So all these things cause anxiety to the non-Muslims. And then the limitation to the height of temples and churches. It cannot be so high, cannot be so tall, and things like that. There must not be Muslim population around if you want to build one. But practically in every part of Malaysia, you can't find such places. Okay. Then there were even objections to sometimes people display cross some of the Muslim fanatics would object, and object to the construction of some temples. So we had cases where temples and churches were objected by the residents, local residents, nearby local residents, Muslims, and then the authorities normally respond favorably to those demands. So when you have so many such cases due to this process of Islamization, definitely you need to have more responses. Okay, so hudud law, objection to restriction of places of worship, snatching of the corpse, and there were by force cases, etc., etc., etc. You can write volumes of books on this. So this is the main cause. And then scholars say recent response has become more radical. We talk about elections, you know. We go to the extent of commenting on election, asking for free and fair election. This may be due to the emergence of a new generations who are more civil conscious and absorb new values of civil society. The new generation exposed to new wave of information yearning for values of civil society like democracy, justice, and so on. So on issues like Rohingya, the Rohingya people in Myanmar, Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia also issue press release to what they call to show our sympathy to the people in Rohingya, and not taking a stand that since we are Buddhist, we don't care. No, we still care. Now, I look at the social engagement model of Malaysia and compare it with the so-called social engagement of other places worldwide. When we talk about engaged Buddhism, as I mentioned to you earlier, in the case of Thich Nhat Hanh, engaged Buddhism, we talk about things that are radical, you know. For example, anti-war during Vietnam, okay, anti-caste system in India, okay, anti-colonial rules. All these are very radical. But in Malaysia, we are not so radical. Our issues may be seen to be radical, but our means have always been very moderate. Meaning to say, we do not resort to very drastic actions like big demonstrations. We usually end up with seeing the various government officers or petition and issue press release to exert public opinions. But we seldom, or we never use public demonstration as a means to pressure or to champion our cause. Whereas if you see the radical engaged Buddhism in Vietnam, in India, they were very much more radical, included demonstrations, fasting, or even like the case of Zhao Hui, fasting to make a point. See? The second observation I noticed is that social engagement, engaged Buddhism in many parts of the world involve mass movement. Mass, that means involve many people, involving the common people. So when there were anti-war demonstrations by Buddhists in Vietnam, it always involved thousands and thousands of Buddhists. And then the mass conversion of Dalits in India, it involves a few 100,000 people. And then the anti-colonial demonstrations in Myanmar, things like that, involve mass movement. This is social engagement. And even like the case of, let's say, Guan Yin refused to move, it involved mass movement, getting 12,000 people to come for a big-scale demonstration. But in Malaysia, so far we never have this. Our movement is, I call it elitist, involve only a small group of educated young people, perhaps idealistic, always very concerned and very sensitive about the issues we are confronting, and always raise these issues, but usually confined to this small group. So this is very much more idealistic. The third characteristic of engaged Buddhism is non-violence. Non-violence, meaning to say we do, despite our mass movement, our radical way of expressing ourselves to get attention, or even come to the worst, you burn yourself to death to get attention, but it is basically non-violence. And I like the word non-violence in why it is not translated as peace. You know, I ponder over this word. Why is it translated as non-violence and not peace? The word non-violence comes from the Sanskrit word ahimsa. So himsa is violence, is non-violence. So literally translated, it becomes non-violence. But it means peace, right? But I also noticed in my own interpretation, I think this word is the correct translation, not peace. Because why? When we say engage Buddhism, we are using a means that is not violent, but not really peaceful. Why I say so? Because you create a lot of agony to the perpetrator of injustice. You show to the perpetrator of injustice, you make him or her not settled, not peaceful. He or she has to search his own conscience to look at the problem. So that's why it is not really something peaceful. No, there's no violence involved, but there is a lot of mental agitation, agony that you have to. That's why I like the word non-violence. Okay. Then in the Malaysian case, I would say it is between peaceful and non-violence. Meaning that actually we do not disturb people's mind so much. We do not create non-violence in their mind, but we are very much more peaceful. So I use the word between peaceful and non-violence. Okay. Okay, I give a brief summary of what I have talked to you since at the beginning of the early history. In the early days, Buddhism, Hinduism was the predominant religious belief. Okay, as we have seen, from the 2nd century AD right until 11th century AD, the natives or the Malays were believers of Buddhism or Hinduism. Then the Malay archipelago was center of Buddhist learning. Okay, especially when we talk about the Pujiang Valley in Kedah, where I Ching spent 4 months, and then on his return journey, 6 months, 4 weeks and 6 months, and then you have the Broga in Sumatra. It's a center of Buddhist learning, but unfortunately, it was confined mostly to the monasteries. And then Buddhism continued to survive during the Malacca Sultanate and the colonial periods. So during the Malacca time, traders who came to Malacca, when they died, they would be buried in the Bukit China Hill. And then there was especially during the later part, the colonial periods, you have the Kuan Yin Thing, to cater to the religious need of the people. So also Buddhism continued to be practiced by the Siamese in the northern states. So in a way, Buddhism continued a bit at a very low key. And then by the time of 1850s, immigrants continued to practice the pluralistic religious belief and subsist on rites and rituals, mainly on rites and rituals. Then during the British rule, there was a greater awareness on the importance of practicing the Buddha's teachings, with especially after the Second World War. people are more exposed, more well educated, and when they enter universities or colleges, they need to meet with Christian missionaries, come and preach to them. So they began to wonder about Buddhism, so they began to study Buddhism. Then we have the formation of new organization as a response to the impending independence. So in fact, after the Second World War in 1945, many organizations began to form. For example, the Malaysian Buddhist Association of Malaysia, formed in 1958, 1 year after independence, actually was formed as a response to the new political entity. So actually, no need any ideology or any thoughts from Tai Chi to tell you what to do. It is just a kind of a situation whereby the country is gaining independence. We are becoming a new country, and the temples, when they gathered together, there were rumors that under the new government, some of these temples may have problems. The government may want to take back the land and things like that. So they began to worry. So they say, "Oh, we must form an organization." So that's how the organization was formed. And also, we must notice, we must acknowledge that after independence, our social economic development provided the impetus for further development. After independence, we have more schools, better healthcare, better transport system, better communication systems, and all these help, in a way, help to develop Malaysian Buddhism. All these economic resources are very important for the further development of Malaysian Buddhism. And then in the last 20 or 30, last 2 or 3 decades, globalization, with the arrival of international, transnational Buddhist organizations like Bo Guang, Tzu Chi, San, and so on, and even the deviant groups, all coming in one by one to Malaysia. So in a way, this changed the landscape of Malaysian Buddhism. So, and then, so if we look at the history, in the past we were subsistence, relying mostly on rituals. And now we have come to a stage of development. So that's why we have the formation of the Buddhist Research Society Malaysia and the Yayasan Belia Buddhist Malaysia. Yayasan Belia Buddhist Malaysia means the Young Buddhist Foundation of Malaysia, of which I'm now the current chairman. This was formed with the objective of providing funds to cater to the educational needs and the medical needs of monks, to provide scholarship to students in the universities, to provide educational care to students in the secondary and primary schools, and so on, and especially training for Buddhist youth. Okay, so that is so much about about the social engagement of Malaysian Buddhism, and a brief summary of Malaysian Buddhism from the beginning to the end. So I think I will take a rest here now. Then we will continue the next subsection. Do you have any question? Do you have any question, or you want to come back and start with question first?
Don't see. Lee, did you have a question?
No, I was going to say, let's think on it and come back with a question.
Okay. You can hear me, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think we're ready to go.
Okay. Oh, okay. We were talking about two unique characteristics of Malaysian Buddhism. One is the role of the lay Buddhist organization. The other one is the social engagement, or the political engagement of Buddhist organizations in Malaysia, particularly the youth. Now, the last section I want to discuss is all this What has this got to do with humanistic Buddhism? Has this got anything to do with humanistic Buddhism? There are many scholars who try to say that the Malaysian Buddhism, especially the Chinese Buddhism, is very much influenced by humanistic Buddhism. Whereas in this subchapter, I want to argue that while Malaysian Buddhism has the normative characteristics of humanistic Buddhism, the humanistic characteristic refers to being socially active, engaged, having lay Buddhist organizations well organized in that sense, and doing a lot of charity work, providing medical care and things like that. But I want to argue that all these characteristics of humanistic Buddhism, although we have all these characteristics, it is not due to the humanistic Buddhism of Chinese Buddhism, as claimed by many scholars. Rather, it was due to a response to the social needs at that time. So I will show you the argument. Now, many people like to associate humanistic Buddhism in Malaysia with Venerable Tai Shi because he was a proponent of humanistic Buddhism and he visited Malaysia. And because he visited Malaysia, many scholars say, well, he had an influence in Malaysia and Vietnam, places that he had visited. But we need to look at this in more detail. In 1926, he visited Singapore. Well, sometimes we have to include Singapore because Singapore and Malaysia is now politically divided, but was not politically divided in those days. It was just a part of the British colony. In 1938, when Venerable Tai Shi was 50 years old, he visited Burma, India, Sri Lanka, Singapore, Malaya, Vietnam. And from Malaysia, he was supposed to go to Siam or Thailand, but last minute was cancelled, and then he went to Vietnam. So during that tour, you notice that he had come to Malaysia. And the diary shows that he was meeting head of Chinese in these areas, gave a few talks. It was more to raise awareness about the Japanese invasion. Well, this was a socially engaged activity by Tai Shi to raise awareness about the Japanese invasion, which started in 1937. From Singapore, when he visited from Singapore, he traveled to Kuala Lumpur, and then Penang, and then back to Kuala Lumpur with a brief stop at the Ipoh train station. And then from Singapore back to Malacca, then Singapore to Vietnam. So he has come to Southeast Asia, no doubt. But he was not here so much to talk about Buddhism, but more to create awareness in his capacity as a monk, to create awareness about the war that is being fought between Japan and China at that time. And so that was the brief visit of Tai Shi to Malaysia. Then we also talk about Ying Sun. Also, people said this great scholar visited Malaysia and might have created some impact in Malaysia. In 1969, when he was 64 years old, he visited Singapore, Penang, and we know he preached at the Heart Sutra at the Triple Wisdom Hall for 7 days. And then Ipoh, Cameron Island, Klang, and then Singapore back. Now, again, he came again in 1976, he came to Singapore, and then 1977 to Cameron Highlands for an ordination ceremony, 1980 to Singapore. If you scrutinize carefully his diary, you will notice that actually he came here and what he preached is the Heart Sutra. So I could not relate how this has got to do with humanistic Buddhism. There's nothing much to do with humanistic. He was not preaching humanistic Buddhism. he was just preaching, in fact, very traditional suttas that were preached by many other people as well. We were talking about Heart Sutra. So he was, in a way, relying on conventional old sutras to preach. So people said, since these two great masters briefly visited Malaysia, so well, perhaps their impact was not much, but they had a great student, Venerable Chuk Mo. Here's Venerable Chuk Mo. Venerable Chuk Mo is a student of the Mingnan College, started by Tai Shi in Fujian province in China. So because Venerable Chuk Mo studied there, and because he studied in Mingnan College, started by Tai Shi, so everybody said he's a student of Tai Shi. But whether Tai Shi taught him directly or not, I don't know. But definitely he would have learned quite a lot of things from Tai Shi. Okay. In 1954, he came to and served in Pote Secondary School. This is the first Buddhist secondary school in Malaysia, 1954. He came and served. And in fact, he was invited to come there to be the head of this school. Because at that time, there were very few educated monks. So he was one of those well-educated monks. So he was invited to come and head this school. And he moved the Everlasting Light, the Wujingden magazine published in Taiwan to Hong Kong to Malaya. And that magazine is still published till today in Malaysia, by the Malaysian Buddhist Association of Malaysia. Because in 1959, he became the chairman of the Malaysian Buddhist Association. And in 1970, when the Malaysian Buddhist Institute was formed, he was the principal. So because of Reverend Chuk Mo, because of his education in Mingnan College, and because the Mingnan College was founded by Tai Shi, then when people said Venerable Chuk Mo carried humanistic Buddhism to Malaysia, and that influenced Malaysian Buddhism. So many scholars argue that way. Scholars generally agree that prior to the arrival of Chuk Mo in Penang, humanistic Buddhism was merely planted and propagated informally. From scholar Zheng Xiaoyin, who is now the head of the religious department of the Chinese Social Science Institute, and Dr. Chen Qiuping, my fellow young Buddhist in Malaysia, both of them agreed that Venerable Tai Shi and Ying Sun have come here, but did not do much. But after the arrival of Venerable Chuk Mo, then humanistic Buddhism was propagated here. In fact, Zheng Xiaoyin, this Chinese scholar in mainland China today, she said Venerable Chuk Mo, under him, humanistic Buddhism gained some development. And then Dr. Tan Qiuping said the humanistic Buddhism advocated by Tai Shi gained tremendous progress and become a mainstream of thoughts in Malaysia. This I could not agree with him. Then Ong Si Yu said, Ong Si Yu is the president of the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia. He said the characteristic of humanistic Buddhism, you have lay Buddhists, you are socially engaged, organized, which we find, we are now is a characteristic of Malaysian Buddhism, were influenced by humanistic Buddhism. So you notice a lot of scholars, both in mainland China and Malaysia, say that we are influenced by humanistic Buddhism of Tai Shi. Okay? And even Venerable Ji Chen, the ex-president of the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia, also makes similar claims. But I totally disagree with the argument that Malaysian Buddhist movement is influenced by the Chinese humanistic Buddhism. Okay? And we would like to show the argument. First, we look at the observation. Before the arrival of Chuk Mo in 1954, there were already progress made including the establishment of Pote Orphanage in 1954 and 1940, and the Pote Primary School in 1946, Pote Secondary School in 1953, and even the establishment of the Penang Buddhist, Penang Buddhist Association in 1920. All these are characteristic, providing secular education, providing the religious education. All these characteristics of humanistic Buddhism were already there, but all this happened before the arrival of Chokmol. So just go a little bit more detail. 1940, an orphanage attached to the Pote Institute was founded by Fen Lian Bhikkhuni in 1935. And 1946, Pote Primary School was founded. 1953, Pote Secondary School was founded. All this before arrival of Reverend Chokmol in 1954. In fact, Reverend Chokmol was invited to come and head the secondary schools. So how can we say Venerable Chokmol is the one that brought about humanistic Buddhism to Malaysia? They were already in Malaysia even before his arrival. And of course, after his arrival, we have some continuation. 1973, we have the Pote Kindergarten. 1961, you have the Siangling Kindergarten. This one is started by Reverend Kim Beng in Malacca. And this has got nothing to do with humanistic Buddhism. And 1951, Siangling Primary School, the only school in Malaysia where Buddhism is taught as a subject, 1951. This one started by Reverend Kim Beng. You notice that it is still earlier than arrival of Chokmol. So they were already awareness to create, to provide for Buddhist education. In fact, I think the main inspiration came from the fact that there were many Christian missionary schools in Malaysia. And when when the Buddhist community become financially affordable, then they would like to begin their own schools. So that's how Siangling was started. So this has got nothing to do with the ideal of so-called humanistic Buddhism propagated by Tai Chi. So if you just look at the chronology of events, all these things happened much earlier than the arrival of Reverend Chokmol. And some of the events that happened subsequently also might not be due to him. For example, Malaysian Buddhist Institute was founded by the Malaysian Buddhist Association, of which he was the president. But the Malaysian Buddhist Association, when it was formed, the main idea was to provide, to have a Malaysian Buddhist Institute. Okay. So I mentioned here a forgotten history. The founder of Pote Institute, 1935, Bhikkhuni Fen Lian, is of great significance. From this first nunnery established, sprang Pote Orphanage in 1940 and Pote Primary School in 1946. So this young nun, unfortunately, she lived very short. If there is any connection between humanistic Buddhism or Tai Chi in Malaysia, it was through Fen Lian. She died at the age of 36, who studied in Minnan Buddhist College. She also came from Minnan Buddhist College, well educated. So she came to Malaysia, and in 1935, then she started the Pote Institute, and then within the Pote Institute started the nunnery, and then started the Pote Primary School. Although the school would have come later after she passed away, but the idea was already there. Therefore, I want to conclude that we can't simply conclude that an observed phenomena is due to a particular thought simply because there are a lot of resemblance, a lot of similarities. We can't say, oh, because you have a secondary school, you have primary school, you are socially engaged, therefore you are humanistic Buddhism of Tai Chi. Because if you look around, Sun Mok in Thailand, the Dhammic socialism of Buddhadasa, we'll be talking about him later. The Sovadaya in Sri Lanka, the concept of Dana in Theravada Buddhism, they all have characteristics of humanistic Buddhism. Socially engaged, helping the people, dealing directly with people in daily life. But they had nothing to do with Tai Chi and Yin Sun, you know. Another point we need to note, and people often forget about the English medium in Malaysia. Because when Chinese scholars do research, they always focus on only Chinese Buddhism. Or when Western scholars, I don't know whether there are any Western scholars studying Malaysian Buddhism, then they will look at English literature and forget about Chinese Buddhism. But if you look at it, if you are bilingual and you check the documents from both sides, you will notice that the English stream in Malaysia also have the so-called characteristics of humanistic Buddhism. But the English stream has nothing to do with the humanistic Buddhism of China. The English streams, the Theravada English stream started the Sri Lankan Buddhist Dharma schools way back in 1929. Because they were a group of immigrants, unlike the Chinese that started Chinese primary schools, the Sinhalese started their own schools within the temple to provide English, to provide Buddhist education and education on the Sinhalese language. So it's a combination. Secular education plus Buddhist education. This secular education, I'm referring to the Sinhalese language. Okay. And then today we see Theravada Buddhist temples started orphanages, and they carry out a lot of welfare activities. They interacted with government on policy matters, and all this have nothing to do with Chinese Buddhism. For example, the Buddhist Missionary Society Malaysia, founded in 1962 by our Chief Reverend Krishnananda. We are the Buddhist organizations most actively engaged with the government, apart from the Young Buddhist Association Malaysia. In fact, more than the Malaysian Buddhist Association, because the Malaysian Buddhist Association headquarters is in Penang, whereas the government's administrative center is in Kuala Lumpur. And Buddhist Missionary Society Malaysia had been in Kuala Lumpur all the while. So we are geographically at the capital and easier to have dialogue with the government. Furthermore, Buddhist Missionary Society Malaysia, the people are English speaking. They have no problem communicating with the government side. Whereas the Malaysian Buddhist Association of Malaysia, their presidents, from Reverend Chok Mo to Reverend Kim Peng to Reverend Chi Huang, all could not speak English or Malay well. So whenever they interact with governments, they will have to bring an interpreter. So the government would prefer to deal directly with the Buddhist Missionary Society Malaysia rather than to deal with them. The present president of MBA could speak English, but he preferred to keep himself most of the time in Penang and refused to hardly come to Kuala Lumpur to have any interaction with any government officials. So its language play an important role here. But from here we notice the English groups will actively engage with the government. But if you ask the English group about humanistic Buddhism or Tai Chi, I think most people will just shake their heads and we don't know anything about that. Now we look back again from the chronological perspective. 1949, when we make efforts to declare Vesak a public holiday, it was before the arrival of Chok Mo. And the leaders of these groups were strict-born Chinese lay people. Okay? And the spiritual leader behind us was Venerable Gunaratana of the Sinhalese traditions and Venerable Tzu Kun of the Kek Lok Si temple. So I would like to say that the characteristics of humanistic Buddhism already appeared from 1950 onwards or even earlier. The Malaysian Buddhist Association, Young Buddhist Association, and Sumangalo all at this time. No one related to humanistic Buddhism. Humanistic Buddhism's characteristics were already well established by 1980. And of course, there is an argument, especially by some scholars who adore Venerable Yin Sun very much. He said because Venerable Yin Sun, the great scholars, have written this Miao Yin Chi, volumes of 8 volumes of writings on Buddhism, and because of this reading of this Miao Yin Chi, then people in Malaysia, Buddhists in Malaysia, are influenced by Yin Sun. I would say if there is, it's very minimal, very minimal. Very few. In the first place, very few people read the Miao Yin Chi. Okay, of course, the elitists read the Miao Yin Chi, and the elitists would like to say that, well, they are influenced by the Miao Yin Chi. That's not wrong. But the vast majorities were not the readers of Miao Yin Chi. Then, very few of those involved in the learning participated in the Buddhist movement. I know when Venerable Chi Chen, supposedly a student of Venerable Sun Yan of Dharma Trump, ex-president of Young Buddhist Association Malaysia, when he came back to Malaysia, he did conduct some courses on Miao Yin Chi for the students. But I noticed most of the students, surprisingly, supposedly to be learning humanistic Buddhism, did not participate in Buddhist movement. Most of them learn for learning's sake or for their own so-called self-improvement, but they were not participating in Buddhist movement. And by my personal involvement in the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia as vice president until deputy president for 20 years, not a word of humanistic Buddhism was mentioned. I think that is good enough testimony. During our career in the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia, when we were engaged in all sorts of social and political issues, we never mentioned about humanistic Buddhism. Humanistic Buddhism was completely foreign to us. So I would say the development after the 1980s is just a continuation of the earlier development. So if you make an inquiry now with leaders of Buddhist organizations, I would say 80% would say they do not know anything about humanistic Buddhism. So how could humanistic Buddhism or Tai Chi influence Malaysian Buddhism? So I presented my view in a seminar. A few years back, there was a seminar, I think about 6 or 7 years back, there was a seminar in Malaysia held in memory of Venerable Yin Sun. And of course, when you talk about Venerable Yin Sun, then of course all the scholars try to impress upon the audience that Venerable Yin Sun had a great influence in Malaysia, including their students studying Miao Yin Chi and things like that. And I stood up to put forth my points that Malaysian Buddhism has nothing much to do with the humanistic Buddhism of Tai Chi. And after that, this man, I don't know whether you recognize him or not, this Liang Wenta. Those of you who watch Phonics television would recognize him because he is the one who always give comments as a commentator in a Phonics television, Phong Hong Tai. So he was in the seminar. So he sort of supported my argument. He said, you know, people always say French Revolution was influenced by Jean-Jacques Rousseau's social contract. But if you scrutinize properly, only 6 copies of that book was sold, you know. And yet, everybody, you know, say, oh, French Revolution is because of this book, Social Contract. See the irony of things in this world. So because now Yin Sun is so popular, so everybody try to say that, oh, Malaysian Buddhism is due to Yin Sun or due to Chok Mo. Some even say Chok Mo is the father of Malaysian Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism. All these extra accolades that were heaped upon them because they were scholars. Okay. So Venerable Chao Hui, in the same seminar, Venerable Chao Hui told the audience, people always resort to certain thought to support their movement. So because you want to support that movement, you always resort to certain thoughts. So Malaysian Buddhist movement, you need some kind of thinking. So people, to support this kind of movement. So you say, oh, it's because of humanistic Buddhism. So I stress one point. We have humanistic Buddhism characteristic first, and later people pull out Yin Sun to support. Then we should not confuse the cause and the effect. So I hope this part is clear. Okay. So the next question is, so what thoughts or what sort of thinkings influence Malaysian Buddhism? So people say, okay, you say it is not due to the Malaysian Buddhist movement today, it's not due to the humanistic Buddhism of Tai Chi or the humanistic Buddhism of Yin Sun. Then what thoughts influence? You know, scholars, especially academicians, we always like to say, what sort of ideas go inside that make this Malaysian Buddhism? So when we ask this question, we assume that the Buddhist leaders have a set of thoughts which directed their actions. But are we directed by our thoughts? I pose this question, but are we really, because of certain ideology behind us, we call it humanist Buddhism, that directed us to our actions? So if there is, it was the sectarian thoughts, like Pure Land thoughts, and for the Theravadas, the Noble Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths, those are the thoughts, or the Chan thoughts, or the meditation thought, Chan. Okay, these are the thoughts that provided the impetus, the strength for us to move Buddhism. So for me, let's say for me, as a Theravada practitioner, then I would say the teachings of the Buddha in terms of the Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Noble Path, 5 precepts, and so on. These are the thoughts that go into me for me to move Malaysian Buddhism, not humanistic Buddhism as a thought that come to me. And for many Mahayanese Buddhists, well, Pure Land thoughts, chanting of Amitabha, that is the idea that goes into me, and that is the idea that turned into energy for me to move Malaysian Buddhism. But even then, to me, these are not the main causes. These are the internal causes, but not the main causes. We have the external cause. The real external cause is the natural working of the social mechanics. I call it the social needs. The social needs. Because social changes bring about new challenges which prompted responses from Buddhist organization. Our society, our political environment, our economy changes from time to time, and all this prompted us to respond. We Buddhist organization have to respond. So we just naturally respond. There's no need for any thought. Does not require a thought to direct us. It simply requires the right response. So, for example, last time we were ordinary common people, don't have a vote, don't have a right to vote, don't have a right to make decisions affecting us. We just have to follow whatever decisions made for us. But now we are citizens, and we feel the need for social adhesion and established organization. Once we are citizens, we know we need the kind of social adhesion or collaboration, and therefore we establish organizations. Do we need an idea or thoughts to tell us, or Tai Chi to tell us that we need to form an organization? Even without him telling us, we can form an organization. In fact, the Malaysian Buddhist Association Constitution clearly stated that there is a need for a national organization after independence. Because independence, that itself provides the inspiration that we must form an organization. Not because Tai Chi said you must form an organization, but because the country is going for independence and we need an organization. And the rise of civil society, as we become citizens in a civil society, we are more concerned for social care, social awareness, and participation. So social services, welfare services, we are becoming more and more concerned. And when there are unfair policies, Buddhists would become more socially engaged, not even spurred by social engagement mentioned in humanistic Buddhism. When we see unfair practices, then naturally we become more socially engaged in response. Okay. So another thing is when literacy arises and education is popularized, especially after independence in 1957. So because of this literacy, now in Malaysia, our literacy is almost 100%. When literacy arises and education is popularized, most people now receive tertiary education. So many informal education will follow. For example, children Dharma classes, seminars, talk, and all the things. So all this, we don't need a humanistic Buddhism talk to tell us. All this would come as a natural consequences of modern day education. So now we have a lot of Dharma classes and seminars. So in conclusion, the development of Malaysian Buddhism is not so much due to the thoughts of humanistic Buddhism, but simply a response to social need. Or maybe we call it today the social needs is simplified in a word called modernized. So the society try to meet the social, modern society. So we say modernized. So maybe we say this is not so much due to humanistic Buddhism, but more due to a need to modernize Buddhism. So social engagement of Malaysian Buddhism was written in this book by Professor Liu Yiguang, YK Liu. In this book, written in Chinese. He talked about social engagement of Buddhism in China, in Vietnam, and in Thailand and Malaysia. So this is my brief talk on Malaysian Buddhism. Okay, covering basically 4 major aspects. Number 1 is the historical background. Number 2, the characteristics of lay organizations. Number 3, social engagement. And number 4, the argument that our social engagement is not so much due to humanistic Buddhism, but more due to Buddhist modernism. Okay, so we still have 20 minutes to go. Do you have any questions? We spend a bit of time on Malaysian Buddhism because Chinese Buddhism, the most active one outside Taiwan is perhaps in Malaysia now. So we need to know a little bit more. Then after that, we will move on to another one, which also has a lot of Chinese influence, and that is in Vietnam. Okay. So you have any question? Let me pause for a while. Think about it. If you have any question.
Well, I would say that the lack of books sold is not necessarily a complete refutation of influence. I mean, how many hundred years was Buddhism around before anything was published?
Yeah, I don't get you.
Oh, you were saying about the French Revolution. You were mentioning the copies of books sold. That was supposed to be an influential essay, I guess it was, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't sell many. But word sometimes gets out without. It's passed around, maybe, or orally transmitted.
Yeah. You might be right in that sense. A lot of us don't read the books, but we could be influenced in some ways. We could be influenced in some ways. In fact, historically, influence is something very difficult for us to gauge. Like Marxism, I think most people don't even read the book by Karl Marx, but there are a lot of Karl Marx supporters all over the world.
Which can be a problem for anything, because if you don't have the source in front of you, it's like that game of telephone, if you've ever played it. You know, after a while, the transmission may be completely transformed, and you have no idea what the original idea was.
Thank you.
Which of course applies to almost anything.
Okay, anybody else? Because now the time left is very difficult for me to start a new chapter, because we are going to move to a new chapter on Vietnam. So perhaps we have spent some time, have some brief discussion.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So this is for clarification. I have a clarification question more than anything else. What exactly is humanistic Buddhism? Oh, so let me rephrase my question. There's Theravada Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism, and all sorts of this prefix Buddhism. Is humanistic Buddhism also like prefix humanistic Buddhism? Because I get the sense that based on the lectures we've been having in the last couple of sessions, it seems to be another trend of some sort, humanistic Buddhism. I thought the whole point was, how is Buddhism humanistic in the sense of practical sense? How is it applicable to lay life? And that was my understanding, but now I'm not necessarily sure. It seems like there's some sort of a movement. I guess, I don't know if the movement is the right word. More or less, my question is, Theravada Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism, Thai Buddhism, well, let's take Thai away, Zen Buddhism, humanistic Buddhism. Is humanistic Buddhism also another form of Buddhism or some doctrine of some sort?
Well, I think, put it this way, Theravada Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism, these are all teachings, sects within Buddhism. Whereas humanistic Buddhism refers to a kind of movement. It's a kind of movement, which if you examine carefully, it is applicable to both Mahayana Theravada or Mahayana Theravada or Vajrayana. It's a kind of social movement. It is not a sect. Okay, it's not a sect. So from the Chinese perspective, humanistic Buddhism has always been mentioned as a movement that emphasizes on the humanistic aspect of Buddhism, as put forth by Tai Chi and Ying Sun. Okay, and they are from Mahayana traditions. Okay, but they would like to interpret their Mahayana tradition in such a way that it goes back to the humanistic aspect, rather than to talk about what you call the ghosts, the gods, and the worship, the rituals, and things like that. But to go back to the what you call, to the basic of Buddhism, and that is humanistic. So that was a movement that Tai Chi tried to advocate, and Ying Sun tried to further elaborate it. So it's a kind of movement. Then there is a problem with sociology, because then later people would associate any kind of Buddhist movement that is socially engaged as humanistic Buddhism.
What are you doing,
Say again?
Jack? Why you got a mask on?
Lee, you unmuted yourself.
Okay.
Who are you yelling at back there?
Lee, your mic's on. No,
Oh, I turned it off. Sorry. I was going to ask a question. Isn't all Buddhism humanistic? I mean, what sect of Buddhism isn't humanistic? Let me ask it that way.
I was just about to ask the same question. I mean,
okay.
Why do we need a separate labeling? It's already humanistic.
Yeah. In fact, that's why my first lecture was to try to talk about the humanistic nature of Buddhism, to lay the foundation that Buddhism by itself, from the very beginning, Buddhism is a humanistic religion. Okay, but when Buddhism or humanistic is a humanistic teaching, but by the time when Buddhism reached China, when it became an institutionalized religion, then many of its humanistic aspects had disappeared, overtaken by the belief in ghosts, belief in gods, belief in Western paradise and things like that. So in a way, Venerable Yin Sun tried to fall back, and in fact, in Taiwan, some people would claim that he is wearing a Mahayana robe, but he is not Mahayana. He is going back to Theravada. He is falling back to the Agama or the Nikayas. So such accusation was thrown on him. You need to say, so in a way, I also tend to agree that Yin Sun actually tried to go back to the original teachings of the Buddha, but he go back right until the Mahayana stage, not the Vajrayana stage. But once this has become like a social movement in China, then in terms of sociology study, we try to we categorize all these movements that emphasize on social engagement, social aspect. We call them humanistic Buddhism. So perhaps I share with you this graph, which I actually prepared for the next lecture. Now I show you, then maybe you can get a better idea.
We cannot see, if you're trying to show something, we cannot see it, or at least I cannot see it. Oh, there we go. Now I can see it.
Okay. Today, what we say humanistic Buddhism or modern Buddhism, or in Sri Lanka, one professor called it Protestant Buddhism. It simply means a kind of description on the Buddhist movement, a kind of description of the Buddhist movement that is modern, humanistic. And this kind of Buddhism, we can actually categorize them into two. One is socially engaged Buddhism. Socially engaged in the sense that it's not a normal social service. It's not social service. The word engage here carries the meaning of challenge, challenge. The French word is not the English word of engaging the rings. It's the French word of I engage you in a fight. It's a socially engaged here means there is a challenge to the society. So humanistic Buddhism may be categorized. This is my own way of categorizing them. One is the humanistic Buddhism of social service. So you begin to build hospitals. You build secular schools for children. You build orphanages. You provide medical care. You provide scholarships. All these are social services. Okay, but there is another group that would like to go more than that. You want to take on the bigger issues of the societies. You believe that all these problems of our human liberations cannot be done by our individual self, must be done together with the whole society. We need to change this whole society. Therefore, we would like to be socially engaged. For example, you fight the caste system in India, or you begin to have anti-wars, or you demonstrated against the government and demanded something, or you like in some monks in Thailand at one time demonstrated and asked for Thaksin's resignation and things like that. This is the social engagement part. Okay. So today, when we say socially engaged Buddhism, it is not referring so much to the so-called social service. So that's why in the humanistic Buddhism in Taiwan today are largely social services. They don't challenge anything of the government, in fact. Maybe a little bit here and there, but by and large, Buddhist movement in China, in Taiwan today are humanistic Buddhism of social services. But humanistic Buddhism of social engagement actually dwindled or became weakened over the years probably because there were no other issues. They were at its peak in the 1960s when the Vietnamese monks were fighting the government. They were engaged with the government. That was at its peak. And before that, Dr. Ambedkar's social engagement to remove the caste system in India. And then, of course, the anti-colonial rules of by the Sinhalese and the Vietnamese against the British. So those were the social engaged Buddhism. Okay? And socially engaged Buddhism can also be divided into two. One, we call it the left wing. The other one we call the right wing Buddhism. Now we are becoming very political now. Left wing and right wing. You know, right wing Buddhism, for example, in Sri Lanka, the socially engaged right wing Buddhists would like the government to be dominated by Buddhists. Everything is Buddhist. Political party also must be Buddhist. Services must be given to the Buddhists. We call it right wing. Try to be as conservative and preservative as much as possible. But you also have the left wing Buddhism, which try to say we must be more open to the liberal democratic society of the present day. So we go for left wing. So we supported, say, LGBT. Well, the right wing would not agree. Right wing would say, no LGBT. We only have male and female. But the left wing would say, no, you support LGBT. Then the left wing would like to say, when we talk about capital punishment, you know, sentence people to death. Well, left wing will say no, but right wing will say maybe yes, we have to continue with this. So right wing may say we have to fight the non-Buddhist. The left wing will say no, we have to be fair to everybody. So, for example, another right wing and left wing in Thailand. When the Thai people try to make the Thai constitution in such a way that Buddhism becomes like a state religion, you'll be surprised that there was actually a group that was led by Buddhists who were against this. Sulak Sivaksa was against this because he is a left-wing Buddhist. He believes in a modern-day democracy, you know, separation of the government and the government and the religion. So he believes it should be separated. So he argued along that line. So if you have this, I hope it becomes clearer now. Okay, now Mike, ponder over it. Yeah, the button. You want to say bye-bye, is it?
I thought that's what you were doing.
Okay. If not, then we call it a day.
7 p.m.
Huh?
7 p.m. tonight for us.
7 our time tonight.
Oh, your 7 p.m.
Yes.
My
7 p.m.
Yeah, that's what the schedule says. So it'll be 9 a.m. for you.
I don't know what happened.
Okay.
I lost it completely.
You're on now.
I am? Okay.
I can hear you, but I can't see you, Sherry. But it doesn't matter. It's time to go.
Thank you, Dotto.
all right.
Time to go,
Thank
Sherry.
you.
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dato.
Thank you.
Thanks.